Imagine being forced to wear a mask not to protect you, but to erase you. A mask of cold iron, heavy and merciless, that burns in the sun, suffocates your breath, and turns your face into a grotesque spectacle for the world to mock. In medieval Europe, justice wasn't always about death. It was about humiliation, pain, and breaking the soul. Tonight, we step into the chilling story of the Iron Mask, not the legend of a king in disguise, but the real punishment used to strip men of their humanity, turning them into monsters in the eyes of the crowd. This is not just history. This is cruelty forged in iron. In medieval Europe, punishment wasn't always swift or bloody. Sometimes it was far more cruel because it lingered. Imagine a prisoner being dragged out of the castle gates by guards, chains rattling at his wrists, while villagers gather with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. They know what's about to happen. Today is not an execution. It's a spectacle. The man's face is hidden behind a grotesque iron mask. It is heavy, crudely forged, and terrifying to look at. Some are shaped like animals, others like demons, but this one has a twisted devil's grin carved across it. To the crowd, it looks almost comical. To the man trapped inside, it is suffocating. The mask is clamped so tight that every breath is a struggle. His voice, if he tries to speak, comes out muffled and broken. The point of this mask isn't just to hide him, it's to strip him of dignity. A human face can show fear, shame, or pride. A mask like this erases that face and replaces it with a symbol of mockery. The villagers begin to jeer, tossing bits of food at him, calling him names, laughing at his misery. Children giggle as they run behind him, pointing at the mask as if it were part of a cruel festival. The man keeps his eyes fixed on the ground, but even then he cannot hide the tears that drip through the iron slits. Inside that mask, it is hot, airless, and heavy. But what cuts deeper than the weight of the metal is the humiliation. He knows his name, his story, and his mistakes, but to everyone else, he is only the beast in the mask. Punishments like these were designed not just to hurt, but to brand a person as something less than human. No one would ever see him the same way again. His crime, whatever it was, mattered less than the shame of being paraded like this. That's the real cruelty of the Iron Mask. It turned punishment into performance, pain into entertainment, and a man into a monster. Daylight brought no mercy. The punishment of the Iron Mask was not only humiliation, it was torture disguised as justice. Iron, unlike wood or leather, doesn't stay neutral in the sun. It drinks in the heat. Imagine standing in the open square. At noon, your head encased in a metal shell that grows hotter with every minute. At first, it is just uncomfortable. The prisoner shifts his weight, trying to catch a breeze that never comes. Sweat begins to pool at his neck, sliding down his back. Then, the heat intensifies. The iron warms to the touch, and soon, it feels like a fire pressed against his skin. The villagers watch as his body trembles. They see his knees buckle, his shoulders strain against the chains. At first they laugh, calling him weak, but slowly the laughter fades. Now the mask glows faintly in the sunlight, almost alive, pulsing with unbearable heat. His muffled cries are barely audible, yet they carry an edge of desperation that silences the crowd. Every second becomes torture. The iron presses harder, into his cheeks, his forehead, his jaw. His skin reddens, then blisters as the mask becomes hotter than anything a man could endure. He thrashes, trying to shake it off, but it's locked tight, bolted at the back. The guards don't move. Their job is not to save him. Their job is to make sure he suffers exactly as intended. Children, who earlier threw stones, now cling to their mothers, disturbed by the sight. Even some adults avert their gaze. The man's suffering is no longer entertaining. It's horrifying. Yet no one dares intervene. To help him would be to challenge the law, and in this place the law is as merciless as the sun itself. When the evening finally comes and the heat fades, the man is barely conscious. His skin beneath the iron is blistered and raw, his body weakened by hours of torture. He does not look human anymore. He looks like a shadow of himself. And still the mask remains. If the daylight was torture, the night was worse. When the crowd dispersed and the laughter died down, the prisoner was left alone with his mask. The guards chained him in a corner of the courtyard or threw him into a damp stone cell. But the iron never came off. That mask became his world. Inside, the air was stale. Every breath felt trapped, recycled and suffocating. The metal pressed against his face so tightly that his skin was swollen and sore. He longed for relief. A scratch, a wash of water, even a moment to breathe freely. But none came. The guard slid a bowl toward him, but eating was humiliating. Food had to be shoved through the narrow slit of the mask's mouthpiece. Water dripped clumsily into his mouth, half of it spilling down his neck, leaving him choking more often than drinking. Sleep was almost impossible. The mask was heavy, and no matter how he laid his head, the iron dug into his skin. When exhaustion did finally win, nightmares came quickly. In his dreams, he saw himself walking freely, only to realize he was still wearing the mask. He heard the voices of villagers laughing even when he was alone, and there were other noises in the night. Rats scurried across the floor, scratching at the stones, sometimes daring to nibble at his bound feet. He flinched and tried to kick them away, but his body was too weak. The sound of dripping water echoed endlessly in the darkness, mocking his thirst. Days blurred into nights. The mask didn't just scar his skin. It began to scar his mind. He started to whisper to himself inside the iron prison, as if trying to remind himself that he still existed, that he was still human beneath the steel. But even he wasn't sure anymore. The longer the mask stayed on, the more he felt his identity slipping away. His name, his past, even his voice, none of it mattered. Alone in the darkness, with his body aching and his mind unraveling, he realized the true horror of this punishment. It wasn't just meant to humiliate him in public or torture him in the sun. It was designed to erase him. The mask wasn't just covering his face. It was stealing his humanity, piece by piece, night after night. By the third day, the prisoner was no longer the same man who had first worn the mask. The humiliation, the burning heat, and the endless nights of suffocation had drained him of strength. His body was weak, trembling with every movement, but it was his spirit that had suffered the most. Once he had screamed and fought, shaking the iron cage on his head with desperate rage. Now he was quiet. His silence was not peace. It was surrender. The guards pulled him out into the daylight again. His legs buckled beneath him, and they had to drag him forward, his chains scraping against the stones. The villagers gathered once more, though the energy of the crowd had changed. On the first day they laughed, on the second they mocked, but by the third many looked away. Some clutched their children's hands tighter, shielding their eyes from the sight. The mask, once a source of entertainment, had become a symbol of horror. His face beneath the iron was blistered and swollen. Pus oozed from sores where the mask dug into his flesh. The stench of sweat and infection clung to him. The twisted devil's grin carved into the mask no longer looked amusing. It looked demonic, as if the punishment had turned the man into the monster he was accused of being. And that was the cruel genius of it. He stumbled through the streets, the guards forcing him forward, his head swaying like it no longer belonged to him. He didn't even resist when villagers spat at him. He didn't flinch when someone threw a rotten apple that splattered against his chest. His eyes, visible only through the mask's narrow holes, were empty. They no longer pleaded, no longer burned with anger. They were hollow. That was the true purpose of the iron mask. It wasn't meant to kill quickly. It wasn't even meant just to hurt. It was meant to break, to strip a man of his pride, his dignity, his identity, until he was no longer himself. And as the prisoner shuffled forward, silent and broken, the punishment had succeeded. He was no longer a man in chains. He was a cautionary tale. A reminder to the village that defiance came at a price not only of flesh but of the soul. When the punishment finally ended, the guards brought him to a small chamber and unbolted the mask. The heavy iron creaked as they pried it loose, the sound echoing like a scream against the stone walls. For days, it had been fused to his skin by sweat, blood, and infection. Removing it was not freedom. It was another form of pain. His skin tore as the mask peeled away, leaving raw wounds across his face. He cried out, but his voice was hoarse, almost inhuman, from days of muffled screams inside the cage of iron. When the last piece came off, the guard stepped back. The villagers who had gathered for one final look gasped. The man's face was not the same face that had first been covered. His cheeks were blistered, his lips cracked, his eyes bloodshot. Sores carved deep grooves into his skin where the edges of the mask had dug in. The devil's grin that had once been hammered into the iron seemed to linger on his ruined face, as though the mask had reshaped him forever. He staggered to his feet, clutching his chains, but no one rushed to help him. He was free of the mask, yet not truly free. Wherever he walked, people would see the scars. They would remember the image of him kneeling in the square, smoke curling from his mask under the burning sun. They would whisper about the man who was no longer a man, but a shadow of cruelty's power. For the rest of his life, he carried that punishment. He could never walk into a market or a church without feeling the stares. Mothers pulled their children. Close fathers averted their eyes as if his scars were a curse. He had become a living warning, an eternal prisoner of the mask even after it was gone. That is the truth of punishments like these. They weren't designed to correct mistakes or deliver justice. They were built to destroy a person from the inside, out, to erase their dignity, their humanity, and leave them as walking reminders of fear. The iron mask was not just a tool of humiliation or torture. It was transformation. And when the fire cooled and the laughter ended, the memory of the man, inside it never truly left. The mask came off, but the scars never did. He walked free, yet remained a prisoner of shame and pain. That was the true power of the iron mask. It didn't kill the body, it killed the man inside.